So one of the most distinctive doctrines that the Indian philosophers came up with, and that you find in the Vedas, you find mention of it in the Vedas, and then a lot of development in the Hindu schools, and partial acceptance by the Buddhists as well, is what is called the theory of karma, or the doctrine of karma. Karma literally means just action. And the idea, the basic idea behind this theory is just simply this. Your actions determine the kind of person you are and the kind of person you will turn out to be or become. Your actions determine what you are, and your actions determine what you will become. The idea is simply, as you sow, so shall you reap. There's nothing different about it. If I smoke a lot, then, future me is going to suffer, right? So I have choices about the actions I do right now. Becomes a little bit worrying whether we really have choices and how much choice we have, especially because the Hindu society in particular was very stratified into the caste system. But, the theory of karma says this, that your actions determine what you are and what you will become. And the way it is distinctive from the theories in the West is that it not only determines how you are in this life, it determines how you will be born in the next life. So according to the Hindus, this life is not the end of it. What we all are doing on this earth, according to their worldview, and this is giving you a sense of the Hindu worldview, and then I'll say something about the Buddhist worldview and how it differs, just an introduction. So according to the Hindu worldview, we are in what is called the cycle of birth and rebirth. All living beings on this planet are in the cycle of birth and rebirth. Even chairs, even the inanimate things are in the same cycle. You will see in the Yoga Sutras next week that if you behave really badly, you might be reborn as a cooking pot. Imagine how much you have to suffer to be on the fire all the time. I'm not making this up. This is in the text. To be on the fire and get burned and then get scratched. Ooh. Anyway, let's not go into the gory details. So all beings, including the material things, including the inanimate things, including the gods, are in the cycle of birth and rebirth, including all the animals. So if, as a human being, we are in a pretty privileged position. If we behave well, if we do what the Hindus expect us to do, and I'll say a little bit more about that, we get promoted, if you like. If I behave well, I do well in class, I have a better chance. Not only in this life, in the next life, I might get promoted to being a god. Or if I behave badly, I might get demoted to being an animal, or a chair, or a cooking pot, so on and so forth. All living beings, everything on earth, is part of this cycle of birth and rebirth. The ultimate aim, according to the Hindus, the ultimate aim is to escape the cycle of birth and rebirth. And that's what is called moksha. That is what is called liberation. In the Hindu framework, it is escaping the cycle of birth and rebirth. Why? Because this cycle is, the distinctive feature of this cycle is that existence is suffering. No matter how enjoyable it seems, existence is suffering. That's the Hindu view of the world. Being in this world, no matter what form you have in this world, is bound up with suffering, and our ultimate aim in life is to escape this suffering. Now tell me, what do you think of this thesis? Is everything in this life bound up with suffering? Are we suffering all the time? No? Why not? You think they're good bits?
You have relationships with people and you have love and happiness. So it's all suffering.
Yeah. Yeah?
Well, everything is transient. So you have a relationship now, but that's definitely going to end at one point. You have things that fall and go. So everything you have turns into suffering.
Yeah, good point. Both the points are good. You know, there are things that are valuable, but, you know, these valuable things might be transient. That's the point there.
Couldn't lots of be a meaningful relationship in itself?
That's a very good point. It's something we will look into great detail next time. Can it be, you know, I mean, if moksha is really getting out of the cycle of existence, if we are going to stop existing, why should we value that thing? You know, as the highest thing to achieve is to stop existing. Who on earth would think that that's a valuable thing to do? Yeah.
But isn't it all about the Hindu culture, I guess, is the one, like, everything has to be destroyed to be reborn sort of thing? And then
Yeah.
so everything gets destroyed, so once you don't want to keep getting destroyed, in the sense?
Yeah, moksha is a permanent state. Yeah. Let me tie this up with some of the things that have been said. Any other reasons to worry about why this might be, you know, the best thing we can achieve is get out of the cycle of birth and rebirth. The best thing, you know, is to stop existing. So here's the Hindu view, you know, in the background of this. The Hindu view thinks this, and there will be a lot of detail and arguments about this in future weeks. Right now, I'm just giving you, you know, what the story is. The story is this, that what we really are, what is essential to us, is a soul, and the soul is a permanent thing. But when we are in this cycle of existence and rebirth, being born and being reborn, we mistake ourselves to be much more than the soul. We mistake ourselves to be the body, to be the senses, to be the objects of enjoyment, and we have desires. So our view of the world is, you know, sort of the root cause of suffering, if you like, is ignorance of what the world really is. The world really is made up, you know, what exists eternally, what exists in the world is the self or the soul, but we mistake it to be. We mistake it to be the body, we mistake it to be the sense objects, we mistake it to be the senses and what we enjoy. So we identify with the wrong sorts of things. Now, when you said about, you know, loving relationships and things that are very valuable, again, you know, we really do not have an insight into what might be really valuable about persons. What we love is maybe their appearance. What we love is maybe, you know, the good times we have with them, and so on and so forth. So we identify ourselves, we identify the things that we want. Our desires are bound up with things that are really transient, but we take them to be permanent. If, you know, I realized that the thing that I really want, you know, I don't know, that Gucci bag in the Chadstone shopping center. By the way, I can't tell what is designer and not. But anyway, you know, if I really want that, you know, I really want that, that's what I desire. But if I realize that that thing is only a transient thing, that thing is not really, you know, what exists, that transient thing. What we hanker after are transient things. What we hanker, what we desire are things that do not have continuing existence, so we are never going to get satisfied. Our desires are never going to, I mean, even with, you know, forget about the Gucci bag. It was a flippant example. Think about things that we really value, relationships, love, you know, that we really value. We want it to continue, isn't it? We want it to continue. And that, the Hindu says, everything in this world except the soul is transient. We don't really understand the soul. We don't have an insight into the soul. We keep hankering after these transient things, and that's the root cause of suffering. That's why this cycle is, the cycle of birth and rebirth is characterized by suffering, is because we mistake what is transient to be permanent, and we want whatever it is that we want it to be with us forever. We want the person we love, we want the things we want that with us forever. And that, cannot be, because the nature of things, except the soul, everything else, it's transient, is impermanent, and it will go out of existence. So there is no point, here's an example, that might make the point clearer. The more you enjoy something, you think, there are lots of valuable things in life. There's a nice glass of wine in the evening. But here's what the Hindus have to say. The more you satisfy your sense organs and give them what they really want, the more attuned they get for wanting more and more of it. So, 1 ice cream, 2 ice creams, 3 ice cream, or 1 glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine, 3 glasses of wine, in the end, it's really going to make you suffer, because this desire is never going to be satisfied. Everything that you enjoy, you want more of it. So pleasure at bottom is pain, because you can't take in as much as you want, but you want it to continue. We want to be in this state of continual pleasure, but it's not going to continue, because it's going to get to a point where it's going to become painful. And all you do by satisfying your desires, feeling happy, is you create more desires in yourself. And the more desires you have, the more you will suffer, the more you will be unsatisfied. This whole cycle of birth and rebirth is characterized by unsatisfactoriness. The root cause is we are always unsatisfied. That's why we are unhappy. That's why we are suffering. And if we realize everything else is impermanent, our soul is the only thing that is permanent and that continues to exist, and find refuge in our soul, so to say, then suffering will go away. This desire for things that are impermanent will go away. That self-realization, that realization that what is really me is not my body, is not the things I have, is not, the things I own, but what is really me is this unchanging soul substance. That, according to them, is moksha. Then you're happy, then you're free, then you're free from this world, so to say. So if you like, it could just be a metaphorical expression. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to leave this cycle of birth and rebirth. The worry about stopping existing. You don't have to stop existing in that sense and jump out of the cycle of birth and rebirth, or jump out of existence into non-existence. Nothing dramatic like that. It is just realizing what is real and what is not real, and giving up the desire for what is not real. That's the basic idea, according to the Hindus. Now, the Buddhists also take this doctrine on board, the doctrine of karma. They also take in all the stuff about the cycle of birth and rebirth. They also talk about being reborn. But there's a big difference between what the Hindus and what the Buddhists think. The Buddhists think everything is transient, including you. There is nothing like a soul substance, the Buddhists think. The Buddhists say that you yourself are changing all the time. So, to go back to the Gucci example, neither the thing you want nor you will be the same in the future. So the desire is completely pointless, according to the Buddhists as well. But because they say that neither the thing that you want persists, nor you persists over time. You are always changing. Your mental states are changing. What you want now and what you want tomorrow, you think this desire is satisfied, this will give rise to a further desire, and we always want what we don't have. So there's no way of satisfying desire, because we are ourselves changing things. You think you satisfy this particular time slice, this particular being that you are, but there's going to be unhappiness. There's going to be suffering in the next moment, because According to the Buddhists, everything is impermanent, including you. Next moment, you're going to want something else, and something else, and something else, and so on. So both Hindus and the Buddhists believe in the cycle of birth and rebirth. Both Hindus and the Buddhists believe that you can be reborn, as an animal, or as a tree, or as an inanimate thing, and so on and so forth. But the difference is that the Hindus believe that you are this permanent thing, but you don't realize its nature. You don't realize that there is a soul substance. That is what is essentially you. The body is not you. They think about rebirth. Death is not something that should be mourned. Why? Because death is just changing a set of clothes. You're going to wear a new body. According to these people. According to the Hindus, you're just going to, it's like changing your dress every day. Death is no different. Nothing touches the soul, so to say. Even being reborn as an inanimate thing is not going to touch your soul. This poor chair has a soul. It's just behaved very badly in previous lifetimes, and so it happens to be a chair. But what is special, according to the Hindus, coming back to the Hindus, about human beings is in this life, we have the ability, we have the rational capacity to gain knowledge, to find out what is right and what is wrong, to behave accordingly so that we can go up the ladder and finally get out of the cycle of existence. And so the human life is to be valued very much. Being a human has to be valued highly, because this is the only life in which you have the rational capacity to gain knowledge of what is right. And if you do what is right, then, either you go up, or you can, even within a lifetime, you can succeed in getting moksha. Either you go up in the ladder and you have a better life. So going up in the ladder, according to the Hindus, can mean many different things. So the Hindus, as many of you might have heard, have the caste system. So they have 4 different castes. They have the highest caste is that of the Brahmins, which are the teachers or the rulers. It's not on the handout. I don't think I've named the caste on the handout, but on page, I will tell you in a minute, I not only have all the castes, but I also have the duties of all the castes, just to give you a sense of, this is on page 25, the duties of the members of the 4 castes, page 25 of the study guide. So the Brahmin is the highest caste, which is the priest or the teacher. Then the Kshatriya is the second caste, which is the warriors and the rulers. That's the second caste. The third is the Vaishya, or the tradesmen, the businessmen, the tradespeople. And the fourth, the lowest caste, is the Shudras, or the workers. And what one should do depends on, which caste one is born into. So if you're born as a Brahmin and have no interest in learning and teaching, you are not doing your duty. Right? It is very important, according to the Hindus, you're not just born into a certain caste by accident. It is your previous life, it is your previous actions which determine what you are born as. This is not just a mere accident that one gets born into. So, there's lots of criticism of the caste system. And why should I do what I'm born into? Because according to the Hindus, it's not mere accident. You are born into this caste because you deserve to be here. It's because of your actions in the past that you are born into this caste. And not only because of the actions of your past, your body and your mental capabilities are. So karma is this thing, if you like, a natural law. It's a moral law which works in such a way that the kind of being you're born as is determined by, the actions in the past, but that also determines not just which caste you're born into, but the kinds of mental capabilities and physical capabilities you're going to have. A Brahmin probably those who are going to spend all their life learning and teaching are not going to be physically very strong. And so they say, going against your duty is bad for you because you're going against your natural grain. That's the Hindu idea. You're not born into this caste by accident. The kind of being you are, the kind of being you are constituted as, is because you were meant to be a Brahmin, or you were meant to be a Kshatriya, and your physical capabilities. So someone, let's say, who's a very shrewd businessman, born into the Vaishya caste, if you try and be a warrior or a teacher, you just won't be good enough. You won't be doing the right thing by yourself, and, you won't be doing the right thing by society. That's the notion of duty. Your duties, according to the Hindus, are determined by two things. They're determined by the caste you're born into, and they're also determined by, the stage of your life. So according to the Hindus, there are 4 stages of life, and that is on the handout. That's called Varna. Sorry, Varna is the caste, Ashram is the stage. So it's Varna, Ashrama, Dharma, which is the first stage of life is being a student, the second stage of life is being a householder, the third stage of life is being a sannyasi, and the fourth stage of life is, kind of giving up completely, renunciating the world. The third stage of life is like, leaving the household duties to the next generation, going off into the forest and living on alms and so on and so forth. The fourth stage of life is just giving up everything. So what one does is very, sort of clearly defined, so to say, what one is supposed to do. It's not that I don't know. You don't have very general principles that you need to interpret as to what should one do. Should one follow, the utilitarian principle, or what should one do? The Hindus have a very, what's the right way to do well? You must do your duties. How are your duties determined? Well, just work it out. What caste you belong to and what stage of your life you are at, and you know exactly what you need to be doing. You keep doing that consistently, and you can only do better. Do better in terms of being born in a higher caste, or being born as a god, or even, getting out of this cycle of birth and rebirth. Any questions? Yeah?
So I've just heard in family and stuff like that. Apparently 64,000 cycles. You're supposed to go. There are different things, aren't there? So like you go to 64,000 cycles, and the last cycle is being a human.
Yeah.
And so my question is like, if you're not good in your cycle as a human, then you are born as something put in the cycle. But then when you're human next, are you born as like a human?
Depends on how you behave in the other,
Okay.
So, as I said, animals also, there is not the rational capacity. What animals are doing and what, these poor chairs and tables are doing is they're suffering on account of their past deeds. They don't have the capacity to decide what to do. They're just sort of, if you like, burning off their karma. They've accumulated lots of negative karma, and they're burning off their karma too. So you make your way up, slowly and be reborn. But you might be reborn depending on, how badly you've done. It's not that if you're a Brahmin, you will be reborn as a Brahmin or anything like that. You could be reborn anywhere. But that depends on how you've behaved as a Brahmin and how much do you have to suffer to make your way up again, so to say.
So being born as a human is something lucky?
Very special. It's not lucky. Well, luck is something you get by accident. Nothing here, nothing in the system is happening by luck. It's not lucky. You've deserved it. That's the idea.
But what about humans who are suffering now in their human life, who are born into like unfortunate circumstances?
It's a good question. I mean, they will give a reason, again, they will give a reason, satisfactory or not, and that's something I'd like all of you to think about. Their reason is going to be, some unfortunate person who's born with a severe disability is not This is not an accident. They're born with a severe disability on account of their actions in the past life, and they've got to suffer through this. You know, whatever kind of life they have got to suffer through this in order to. It depends on how much you have to suffer. You know, if you're born as an inanimate thing, really you don't have to suffer much because you're a lifeless thing. You have to, you know, sort of, the amount of suffering is proportional to the amount of bad things you've done, kind of idea. That's the idea. And there is questions about this. There's, you know, debate about proportionality and so on in the karma, in the people who talk about karma. But that's the idea. If you don't have to suffer much, you'd probably be born as a chair. Or, you know, in an affluent family. But if you have to suffer a lot, then the circumstances are. So people, you know, people who are poor in India, they always say, you know, this is not because of, you know, this is not an accident. This is my fate. I'm working through my karma to become better. But luck does not play a role in this picture. Everything is determined. Natural and moral determinism.
So when you're a human, that's the only chance you get to change the future.
Yeah.
When you're an animal or an animate object, you're just going through it until you become
Yeah.
start where possible.
Yeah.
And is karma just actions, or is there a kind of different virtue of like the way you think, the way you, or is it just I did this, I did that?
Good.
Or is it more of a virtuous way of being and thinking?
Yeah. Good question, you know. So karma, as I said, karma is action in one sense, but karma is also, if you like, you know, karmic is the negative. People talk about negative karma and positive karma. If you do good deeds, if I'm a Hindu and I do exactly, you know, what my caste and my station in life, I'm a student, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Brahmin, and I learn very well. I do my best to learn as much as I can. That's getting good karma, right? So you can get positive karma. That's how people talk about it. So karma is also residue acquired on account of doing good actions. If I behave badly, go off and play, or, you know, do the sorts of things I shouldn't be doing, then I get negative karma. And, you know, the question you're asking, is this positive and negative karma determined only by the action I actually do, but what's going on in the head, right? I might be doing this action just because I want to get a better life. You know, I have no intention of doing my duty. So intentions have a very important role to play. So very soon we'll come to this idea, both in the Hindu and the Buddhist, that intentions determine the quality of karma. It's, you know, what you want. Why are you doing your duty? What motivation you have for doing your duty that matters. It's not just the physical act that determines the quality of the karma. The kind of intentions that you bring to an action also determine the kind of action. It counts as good or bad on account of your intentions, as well as, you know, the action. So both things matter. The physical action, the actual act matters, but the intentions also matter.
How would a Hindu respond to sort of regional differences in the Varna system in sort of practical reality? So, you know, there's, you know, some Brahmins in the north of India aren't born into scholarly families, but their birth is predetermined.
Yeah.
They're born into a poor, like, street sweeping Brahmin family, whereas in the south, the Brahmins have maybe comparable, they hold more scholarly positions. How does that fit within the sort of Varna system?
Again, as I said before, according to the Hindus, that's not going to happen. As a Brahmin, you can't be born into a street sweeping family. If you are sweeping the street, you are going against the grain. You know, you are not doing what your caste requires you to do. If you're doing those things, if your circumstances are such that you're forced to do those things, your circumstance, that's, you know, just the Hindus' will. And I'm not endorsing this by any measure, on any measure. The Hindus will say, that's because of, you know, your bad karma in the past, and what you need to do now is to stand up and find ways to do what your caste, what your duty requires you to do. Doing this will only, you know, this is taking as if the weak way out to survive. I mean, you might not think, you know, people have no choices. They're sweeping the streets because they have no choices. The Hindu philosophers, at least the Hindu philosophy is going to say, no, they have choices. You know, they're just not looking hard enough for what those choices are. They're not trying hard enough to find ways to be able to fulfill their dharma.
So the Varnas could be considered as a utopian ideal, an ideal rather than something that happens.
To some extent, that comment might be right, but it doesn't sound very utopian, does it? I mean, when we think of utopia, we think of a place where everyone is equal. Right? We think of a place where there is enough for everyone. And this is a very stratified society. Now, people here might feel, yes, this is utopian, because they're resigned to their fate. You know, because of the determinism that I mentioned. You know, there's a degree of moral determinism and natural determinism. You are the way you are on account of your actions in the past. And you're suffering, or you're enjoying, or being rewarded on account of your action in the past. So, you know, yes, you might think it is utopian in some way.
They might consider it as an ideal
Rather than what actually obtains. I mean, here's the difference. Look, you know, I mean, if you ask me a question about what Indian society is today, and, you know, how people in India live and what the caste system is, Hindus don't have to believe every bit of this, right? And there are many differences. There are many differences in the philosophical schools, in how these theories are explained, but there are many differences in how people respond to, you know, this picture. What I'm trying to give you today is the picture. And, you know, yes, the picture is flawed in various ways. I certainly don't think of it as a utopian, but with any kind of picture, there will be a gap between, you know, what the picture is and what the reality is. And you know, you have to think of ways of matching it. If you really believe, you know, that karma is the ultimate truth, how do you match the reality? I mean, what would you say about the rest of the world, people who are not born as Hindus? I mean, what about you know, what about some of you guys who are not Hindus? What would you say? Haven't got a hope of redemption? Have you? Why? What would the Hindus say? What would this karma picture say? They're not the only ones in the world, right? Living in that valley in India. What about the rest of, may I say us, because I'm Australian now? You know, what about the rest of us? Well, what do you think the Hindus might say? Any idea? Well, you've just been very bad. In previous lives, you've just been very bad. That's why you haven't been born as a Hindu. That's why you don't even have the opportunity, you know, to learn about the Vedas, to learn about the castes. And so being born, say, as a Christian or an atheist or, you know, a Jew or any other, the Hindus are going to say, you know, is that you don't have the same opportunity like us bloody Hindus have in this life. We're a bit more fortunate. We behaved a little bit better in the past life, and so we're fortunate enough to be born. So we are closer to the truth, if you like. And, you know, you just have to live this life out. One important thing about Hindu, you cannot convert. According to the scriptures, you cannot become a Hindu. It's not, as I said, it's not a choice. It's not that, you know, you learn about Hindu philosophy and decide, I want to be a Hindu. You know, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go and join, what is it, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, or some, you know, sect like that, and wear Indian clothes and orange robes and do all of that. That's not a possibility. Hinduism is one faith which, you know, not only does not proselytize, there is no way, according to the scriptures, that one can become a Hindu. You're either born a Hindu or you're not born a Hindu. It's it's determined, it's fixed. It's not a matter of becoming a Hindu. I mean, it's difficult to become a Jew as far as I know, but there is a way of doing it, and it's prescribed. Christianity, of course, is very open, but Hinduism is very strict in that way. You can't become a Hindu. Now, I just said I'm Indian. I don't know. I haven't said I'm a Hindu, so I might be one of you. Yeah.
As you sort of like everybody kind of acquires more knowledge about these philosophies and stuff.
Yeah.
Hinduism believe that some types of ignorance is being slowly taken away from everybody at large, as they could accumulate more understanding and get closer to the truth. Does that mean that we're all slowly moving towards moksha, and we'll get to the point in however many years where we're all reach?
Yeah, I mean, slowly you will have to do it according to the Hindus, the way the scriptures say it. As I said, they say human life is very important because in this life you have the rational capacity to make choices, and make choices that will make your life better in the future. But I mean, there's two answers to that. One would be to say that it's an individual who gets to moksha. It's not, all of us don't slowly get to moksha, but we can slowly get to moksha in one way, in the sense that if we do better and better, we might be reborn as a Hindu. Or we might, sort of learn about Hinduism and then behave in a way that maybe would open the doors, to moksha, to liberation in some sort of way. But it's not as if the notion of an individual is very important in Hinduism. My karma is going to affect me, and your karma is going to affect me. There's nothing like a collective karma, that the world will become a better place if I do well. And it's not like that. There's no notion of collective karma. Every individual has their own karma, so to say. And that's what determines how their life will go.
Yeah, review about how you choose the best life. So if the best life is liberation from rebirth, would you still have to do your purpose in life? So however you walk, say if you're in the lowest floor of the tree, would you do what you're supposed to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Escape the cycle?
Yeah, you want to escape the cycle, you have to do your duty. And if your duty is, to sweep the floors, to, clean the toilets, to do whatever. I mean, the Hindu society, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with doing these things. We all do it at home, right? But the point is the Hindus look down upon those jobs. The Hindus in that society, that was, the lowest rung of society. And there the idea is, but, even in that, there is a possibility that even a Shudra, someone belonging to the lowest caste, can get moksha in this lifetime. You do not have to be reborn through all the castes and be a Brahmin and be a god and then move up slowly. It is possible to get moksha within a lifetime, given that you do your action, you do your duty, you fulfill your duty with the right kind of intentions.
So, I can understand how fulfilling it is to live life would move you up the ladder. But if you want to escape the ladder, and what matters to you is saying, well, this is my identity, like I am the soul, I don't mind what's placed in life. But you wouldn't mind being a chair or being this human or that human, you just mind being yourself. So how does that, I don't understand how that goes.
Yeah.
Following the ladder was to try to escape it.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. What moksha is, what liberation ultimately consists in, is not an easy thing to answer. What you get in the Vedas, what you get in the Upanishads, is a kind of metaphorical description of the state. It is freedom from suffering. It is a permanent state, unlike everything in this world which is transient. So mostly what you get is negative descriptions of moksha. And sometimes you get positive descriptions, but they're metaphorical. Because it is not the state of existence, like me and you understand existence in this life, it's very difficult to say what that state is. It's very difficult to define. It is the state of bliss. Well, you will never suffer again, right? Okay, fine, but what that is very difficult to say. And different Hindu schools have different descriptions. The Nyaya school, one of the schools that I mentioned, has never, describes it as a positive state, but they only say, it is being completely fed up of this world and sort of having this. One gets to that state when one sort of genuinely thinks, no more of all this. That's moksha. No more of all this. Being on earth, being in this life, having a life is like being on a roller coaster. There's pleasure, there is pain, there is up, there is down. It's tiring, it's exhausting. And so one description of this is no more of all this, just a negative description. That's what moksha is. It's very unlike this. But then when you stretch it that far, something that I'm trying to tell you is so unlike this. Well, what is it, Manima? I don't have an answer, and I don't think in the scriptures you find either metaphorical descriptions or negative descriptions. You don't find a positive description of what it might be. So what the Hindus have to say, it's only a state a person can experience, not a state that you can describe in words. That's, one idea. An idea, and, I've mentioned it on the handout, according to one of the other schools, the Vedanta school, is that you become one with reality. You realize that you're not an individual, you're one with reality. This sort of feeling of oneness is another metaphorical way. What that might be, everything is ultimately, your self-realization is to realize that, ultimately we're all one. Another description. I don't know how to cash them out any further than here. Any other questions?
So the bad mistakes you make in life, you only pay for them after you die, not during?
No, you can pay in this life as well. So it's, what they have to say, and we'll talk about some of the details next week when we look at the Yoga Sutras, is when the fruits of your negative karma will take fruit depends on the intensity of the karma. So it depends on the intensity, how bad you've been, is how long it will take for you to suffer. That's the idea. So there's no notion of, there's no sort of prescription about when it will happen. But the idea is whatever happens is not going to happen by accident. It's on account of your past actions. That's the basic idea. Nothing happens by accident. And don't think, karma is not like a god or a supercomputer or something that is keeping an account. The way the Hindus seem to think of it, it's a natural process. So, you are slowly becoming. You're not carrying anything with you. You're slowly becoming that kind of thing. You are evolving into a kind of thing that has the characteristics on account of some of the characteristics might be, might take shape in this life, others in a future life. Yeah? You had a question? Mm-hmm. Any other questions about the theory? Let me say one thing about moksha I haven't said as yet about liberation. So I talked about if you do the right things and if you do behave according to your duty, you become, you get a lot of positive karma. If you do bad things, don't you get a lot of negative karma. What you need for liberation, according to these Hindus, is neither positive nor negative karma. You need your bank balance to be zero. How do you get to that? You get to that by doing actions and not sort of getting residue. not getting karmic residue for it, not getting positive karma. If you do your actions, and this is where the point about intentions is going to come into play, if you do your actions, if you do the right thing because you want to have a better life, not because it's your duty, they want this notion of doing the right thing just because it's your duty, not because you want to get a better life. So if you do your duty just because it's your duty, you don't get any karmic residue on account of it. So what we have to work towards slowly is, enjoying our positive residues, suffering our negative residues, and making sure we don't accumulate any new residues. And the only way of stopping residues from accumulating is making sure you do your actions just because you do what you're supposed to do, just because it's your duty, not because I want this or I want that, or I would like to be reborn as a Brahmin, and that's why I want to do X, Y, and Z, because I want to move up the ladder, or I would like these special powers, and so I should do X, Y, and Z so that I can be reborn as such and such. That way, you do the right actions, you do your duty, you will get positive karma, but you will not, you won't move closer to liberation. To move closer to liberation, to move closer to moksha, you need to have the right kind of attitude. And the right kind of attitude is, the selfless attitude, so to say, not wanting things to be better for you, but doing your action just because it is your duty and that's what you're supposed to do. That's the idea. You need your bank balance to come to zero to get to. And it's a very difficult thing to do according to these Hindus. Any other questions? Yeah? As I said, the duty, for the Hindus, the duty is determined by what caste you are born into and what stage of life you're at. So if you're born into the caste of, let's say, let me use the example of the lowest caste as a Shudra, and the workers, and you are at the student stage of your life, the first stage of your life, what you have to learn is how to do your job properly. So how to learn to clean properly. If you're born as a Brahmin, where your job is teaching and learning, then in the first stage of your life as student, you spend most of your time learning. You're going to school and, learning at the Gurukul, and so on and so forth. Similarly for the warriors, similarly for the businessmen, the farmers, the tradespeople, and so on and so forth. So depending what stage of life, then you have the second stage of life, which is when you're a householder. Then there's the third stage of householder. You have duties, as a male, you have a duty to bring up your family. You have to provide for your family. So duties change according to. Children don't have those duties. Fathers do. They have to provide for their family. Women have different duties from males. So the duties are all specified in the scriptures. So you can have many duties in life? Yeah, you're going to have many different duties, different times of your life. You're going to have different duties that you need to do. Any other questions? Is this picture looking attractive or unattractive? Unattractive? Let me say a few more things, and then we'll stop. We'll finish a little early today. But please, please, please do the reading for next week. It will be much more fun. If you have a look on Moodle, every week there's one thing that I say which is essential reading. The other is recommended. I'm not expecting you to read everything. It's just there so that, if you're writing an essay, you might like to read more on that topic. But just the essential reading, which is not always going to be fun, sometimes difficult, but come to class with questions, so on. So according to the Hindus, one more thing I want to add. According to the Hindus, moksha is not the only thing in life which is valuable or desirable. It's the highest. We need to work towards it. But according to the Hindus, there are other things that are desirable as well. there are four. In fact, they have the four aims of life, and these are also on your handout. So there is karma, not karma. Karma is action. Karma is also used in the terms of positive and negative residue. But the Hindus had a very strong notion, in some point of life, what you are supposed to pursue is physical pleasure, sexual enjoyment. It's a very important aim of life, very important thing that we should aim for at some stage in our lives, not at all times, but at some stage in our lives. So there is karma. There is also material prosperity. That's very important to the Hindus. You have to work towards becoming rich and doing well. That's important as well. Then dharma is the third thing. That's your duty. That's the one I've been talking about. And then moksha. So they have their four things. The first two are, so even though, the Hindus think that, and I said that before, all pleasure is to be, all desire is supposed to be done away with. But the Hindus do not want to have the view that all pleasure needs to be done away with. All desires for pleasure need to be done away with, but not all pleasures. Karma, which is sexual or physical enjoyment, and material prosperity are two very important aims in the Hindu way of life. Those of you, if you ever look at Hindu temples, there is always lots of erotic art, because that's a way of celebrating life. That's a way of celebrating human life. That's very important to the Hindus. Being born as a human, the point you made, is very important to the Hindus, and it's a way of, celebrating human life is very important. A way of celebrating prosperity is also very important. You have to work harder. You have to provide for some part of your life as males, not as females. Females don't have to go out and work. As males, you have to provide for your family, and the better you make, the conditions at home, so those two are perfectly acceptable, aims. It's not a culture which suggests that you've got to be an ascetic all your life. You've got to be an ascetic later on in life. There's a point in life where one needs to give up on these pleasures. These are things that one works towards in the first and the second stage of one's life, but not right throughout one's life. There are other things, there's this notion of evolving into a more mature person. There's a time and place for everything, if you like. There's a time and place for everything. You do this part of life, do that, another part of life, and then move away from it. The Hindus will never say, it's considered very bad if you walk away from your duties. People often ask me this, what if I, give up, I become a Hindu and give up my family and go and join a sect? The Hindus are certainly not suggesting that. You will get a lot of negative karma if you, leave your family and disregard your duties in that stage of your life and walk away and become an ascetic. That's something that is an option, when you grow older, not as a young person, that you need to give up all the pleasures of life. You need to have these pleasures, but with the right attitude. I mean, what is important in these, talking about these aims or attitudes, is you take part in every aspect of life, but with the right attitude. It shouldn't, it is something I do because, it sounds a bit crazy, but it's something that I do because the scriptures tell me it's good for me to enjoy, sex or money or these sorts of things at this stage in our life. But that's how they say it. That way, it's kind of a regimented society. Like you were suggesting, it's an utopian society. Everything works well. Everyone has, different kinds of wants. Those desires get fulfilled at different points in life. There's no point. There's lots of stories about, people who give up, who get disenchanted with the world too early, and then they go and join, both in the Hindu and the Buddhist, in the literature, in the myths. go and join a sect, and then they're forever unsatisfied because they haven't had a chance to enjoy the pleasures in life. So, the Hindus never suggest that you need to give up everything and walk away from the pleasures that are available and that should be enjoyed. It is just they have to be done with the right attitude, not with the desire for pleasure, because the desire for pleasure will only give you further desire, and further unsatisfactoriness, and further being tied to this cycle of birth and rebirth, and so on. Any other questions? I'm done for the day. If there are no other questions, okay. See you next week, and please do your reading. It will be fun, promise you. We'll start looking at the arguments. Today was lots of storytelling, but I hope that storytelling gives you a flavor of what we're going to get into. Okay, thank you.